You're fine. You're fine.
I'm hurrying.
It's just a workshop. So Jenny, if you want to go ahead and take roll.
Councilmember Thorson? Councilmember Peterson? Councilmember Wong?
Here.
Councilmember Cole?
Here.
Mayor Furlong?
Here. Quorum is present. A motion to adopt the agenda? Moved by Councilmember Peterson,
Second.
second by Councilmember Wong. Any discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is adopted, and we have 4 topics for tonight. And I'll turn it over to City Manager Frandl.
Thank you, Mayor. First topic up is the water storage siting study. We have Morgan here from WSB to speak to us about that.
Thank you, Brian. Thank
Welcome,
you.
Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So this workshop item before you here tonight is something that has been discussed off and on in terms of an update for council. The water storage siting study, which is in your packet in totality, so the full technical document is there. And we don't need to get into all the details, but I'm here to just provide a brief overview. I have a technical expert here, someone who actually has expertise in water storage towers and design and a lot of the analysis that goes into what is in the report. His name is Arsenio Puga with WSB and Associates. Arsenio actually did work on the plan. I think your signature is in there somewhere, right? Yep, okay. So we've got him for answering technical questions if the council does have any, what went into the study. Basically, the need for that study was driven by a fact that has been knowledge within the city since at least the 2008 comprehensive plan update. So that's 2 comprehensive plan updates prior to the one that we're working under right now, which is the 2040 comp plan. This would have been the 2030 comp plan, which was adopted by City Council in approximately 2008. And that was deficiency in terms of drinking water storage capacity within the city. And that deficiency is set by something that's called 10 state standards. So that's an adopted kind of standard by which cities develop their drinking water system and can determine what is the appropriate amount of storage that is needed within that city given a certain amount of demand or population, et cetera, et cetera. So we've had this shortfall in terms of how much storage we have, how many gallons of water can be stored within our water towers for the city of North St. Paul compared with the existing standards since at least 2008. So we've known that we need to add some storage. Now, the fact that we're short storage doesn't mean that we're running out of water. It's not kind of a dire situation that creates some sort of issue for the drinking water customers of North St. Paul or the city of Maplewood. We do serve portions of the city of Maplewood with drinking water. It just simply means that basically the wells that, or the pumps that run in the wells that supply the city, they're running a little bit more often than would be typically expected in terms of a standard setup for a city of the size of North St. Paul. So once, if this study is used as a point of reference moving forward, once a site is set, an option is selected from a capital improvement planning standpoint, a tower is planned and programmed within the future capital investment program for the city of North St. Paul. That will be a future improvement to the system. At this point, we've done enough work to evaluate different alternatives. There is a recommendation. There's also a site recommendation and an approach recommendation in terms of how we would potentially go about adding additional storage. So in really broad brushstrokes, the recommendation is for a 750,000 gallon elevated storage tank. And the site location recommendation is in Tower Park. Okay, so there's an existing water tower in Tower Park, hence the name there. It's smaller. And basically the recommendation in terms of how to add storage is to leave the existing tower online, construct this new tower at 750,000 gallon capacity, and then take the old one offline, whereas in another situation, you might be having to take that out of commission and then put it up. So we have some ability to kind of work within the existing footprint of Tower Park. and hopefully not be very short on the storage while that construction would be happening. There's also an analyzation of the 50-year total cost of different types of water towers, a fluted column versus composite water tower. The recommendation is basically for the least expensive 50-year total cost, which is not just the design and engineering that goes into it, also the construction, but also the ongoing operations and maintenance. So every so many years, different types of materials need to be recoated, rehabilitated. If you look at that kind of 50-year cost for a composite water tower, it's actually less expensive than a fluted column water tower. So again, the recommendation is for using that Site 2, which is the Tower Park site, and the composite type of construction for the tower, which results in a 50-year total cost of just over $4.7 million. So those are the broad brush strokes. Do you have anything that you'd like to maybe just add before we go to questions, Ursi?
No, that was a pretty good summary. The only thing is, the main reason why the composite water tower and the fluted water towers vary so much in cost, even though we're building the same size water tower, is because typically a fluted column water tower uses about 2.5 times more steel than a composite. A composite water tower is, a lot of it, it's just concrete. So when it comes to rehabilitating that tower, with the fluted column, which has basically everything is made of steel, you're rehabbing the entire thing. So you're sandblasting, recoating, painting everything. Versus the composite, you know, I would say 80% of it is concrete that you don't touch. So you just touch that 20% of steel. And that's why if you look at the table that's in the report, the numbers are quite significant between the two types of towers, even though they're the same size. So kind of the reasoning behind that.
So, yeah, typical standard practice to recoat or rehabilitate a steel tower would be every 15 years, 20 years?
15, 20, yeah.
15, 20, and with a composite, is it the same cycle? You're just,
This-
you have to do less.
The steel is the same, it's 15, 20. You're just doing 20% of the tower versus 100% of the tower, basically.
So your maintenance costs are significantly lower.
Yeah, and you might ask yourself, well, why aren't there more composite towers out there, you know, right? Because if they're cheaper to build and they're cheaper to maintain, right? But it's more of a newer style of water tower. A lot of the older ones have been steel, whether they're multi-legs like the one you guys have or a single column with the tank on top. And because steel is so expensive to rehabilitate, you know, I'd say over the last 20 years, more and more of these composite ones have started to come into play, and that's why you guys don't have a composite one currently at the moment.
So with that, your engineers will stand for any questions the council might have. Again, there's no action here. You know, a potential next step, I guess, would be to fold this into a future capital improvement planning efforts to pick a year. Oh, we should mention that staff did add this tower as a potential future placeholder within the state's drinking water revolving fund project priority list, so that in the future we could potentially take advantage of either state revolving low-interest loan funds, or now with the federal infrastructure package that is starting to be finalized now, what we're hearing through others is that the state of Minnesota anyway, is going to be using the drinking water and clean water revolving fund programs, existing programs as they are, to help deliver some of those federal dollars as they come down through into the state of Minnesota. So again, we're on this project priority list for a future water tower in the city of North St. Paul. We're on that list. There's another couple steps to go through if we are going to take advantage of funding opportunities, and there's no obligation to use those funds, but we simply have reserved the opportunity to do that when we get to that point. And I think there might be a little bit of a window time frame.
Yeah, so that's something big I wanted to emphasize. So the fact that your project is listed on this drinking water revolving fund, it doesn't mean that you have to request the funds to do the project. A lot of communities request funds and then the project falls through because of many reasons, and the project, it's not built, it doesn't get built or designed or anything. So they give you a 5-year window from the time you apply to the time you want to request the funds. So essentially what happens is you send in an application, which you already did. It's like, a couple page application. If you're approved because they see there is a need, they'll get you on the list. And then you have 5 years from that time that you get on the list to then send another application, which is another like 2 or 3 page application saying, hey, I want to request the funds to move on with my project. If you never send in that second application, after the 5 years, they just take you off of the list. And then if you want to get back in, you just have to reapply again. So we took the opportunity to do that because there's really no obligation to the city to move forward, but it's nice to be in that list should you want to do this next year or in 2 years or in 3 or whatever, so.
You're saying, Morgan, that it's a grant, is it matching funds, or is it low interest, or what are you thinking?
So the basis of the program is low-interest loans, which, if you look at the loans that, typical obligation loans that you can get now for interest rate, they're pretty close to each other. But should those obligation loans, the interest rate for those start to rise, then the loans offered through the program are actually very attractive because they're around usually 1 to 1.5%, which is great. Now, they do have some restrictions as to, for example, the type of materials that you can use to build whatever project you're doing. So like something that comes to mind, like steel has to be American steel, for example, and they have other restrictions, but that's just one of them. What was the other part of your question?
Interest, low interest.
Oh, low interest, yeah, so.
As opposed to a straight grant.
Yeah, so it's a loan, it's not a grant. Now, however, what Morgan was saying through the funding that's coming in from the government, like he said, that's gonna be distributed through this drinking water revolving fund. So there's an opportunity that as that starts getting distributed, that may be a percentage of those funds could be an actual grant versus 100% of it be a loan, but we won't know until they finalize that.
And that's coming out when, anytime now, isn't it, or is it?
So, I think it's going to be several months before the states are able to talk to cities about what's the appropriate, channels, applications, how it's going to be distributed. So I think we'll know more in the next 3 to 6 months from the state of Minnesota. And frankly, there's portions of it that aren't even approved in Washington DC yet, right? So, it's going to take a while. Any other questions of your engineering staff?
I have a few, but go ahead, Councilmember Wine. Go ahead. So would this handle I'm looking at the graph here, and so that would accommodate for the M&I homes and all that? Is that kind of where the majority of that water is going?
So from a planning and capacity and demand standpoint, the sizing of the tower does take into account not only current population and current demand, but also future population and growth, which would include MI homes and things that have yet to occur as well. So
Because
we're
we talked about a tower down there
originally, right.
originally.
But so the storage, at least in the recommended site here, serves the development in the downtown area or in other parts of the city as well, too.
Good. Does that create more pressure for the pipes?
No.
No.
It does not. There was a component of the study that did look at the variation in pressures throughout the city and the drinking water network. So in the northern parts of the city, we have some lower pressure areas. Other parts of the city, I want to say kind of west bordering with Maplewood, they're higher pressure, and the intent of some of the engineering effort as we were looking at that was to see if there was a cost-effective way to separate the city into 2 different pressure zones. That is something that some cities do try to take advantage of if there's significant relief or elevation change, like a city like Duluth, for example, right? You might have multiple pressure zones because you can't You can't have just one set of water towers or one set of elevations of the water because the city is just at different levels, right? And North St. Paul is a much less extreme version of that. Everything that we have fits within standards, so our lowest pressure areas are within tolerances for a low pressure city system. Our high pressure areas are within tolerance for a high pressure system. We don't need any pressure booster pumps or pressure reducing valves for other customers. Some cities do need to look at those types of things. But what we wanted to look at is, again, is there a cost-effective infrastructure improvement that can happen within the city or be planned within the city to try to break things into pieces? We did look at it, and not every feasibility study says, yes, this is feasible. What we found is that it was not cost-effective to try to start separating the city into two separate pieces, right? Because it does function. There is low pressure and high pressure, and it is very costly to make these types of things, make these improvements where you're digging into streets and basically dividing something that was already planned to be one zone into two different zones, and you need to provide interfaces between those two zones from a pressure standpoint. So hopefully I'm explaining that well enough, but basically the result of looking at that was that it's recommended to stick with the pressure system that we have right now.
And just to add one thing, so what Morgan's talking about, it's Appendix D of this memo, that it kind of came about to be its own study, but it ended up being included as an appendix to this one. So if you want to read more into that, that's Appendix D of this memo. So.
One last question is, so we do have some litigation that's out in regards to White Bear, in regards to groundwater. If that was the case and we had to go to groundwater, that would totally change this whole plan?
So there's too many unknowns for myself or anyone, I think, to comment on that right now. Speculatively speaking, if the city of North St. Paul moved away from a groundwater drinking water source and towards a surface water
Yeah, so.
drinking water source, there still may be a need for the city to own and operate its own water main pipes and water distribution system and fire hydrants, and water towers is another component, right, of a water distribution system. So I think what you're asking is if, because of the White Bear Lake situation, if the city of North St. Paul moves away from groundwater, do we still need to build a tower to address this shortfall in terms of storage capacity? I don't have that crystal ball, but it's very likely that the city will still have a system that it needs to maintain regardless of the source of water. And even if one of the other things that was talked about was a connection to St. Paul Regional Water, which the city of Maplewood uses right next door, St. Paul Regional Water is not, at least at this time, and we've met with them to have this discussion with them to understand, they are not in the business of owning and operating networks, like taking over water towers or taking over the city of North St. Paul's water main pipes. In theory, if that transition were to occur because of the White Bear Lake situation, they might be a wholesale water supplier to the city of North St. Paul. But again, we still have to address our own water main breaks. We have to have our own water towers and our own infrastructure. So again, that's a situation that could feasibly happen where we shift away from groundwater, but we still need to build a water tower to address our shortfall in storage.
Okay. Any questions, other questions for Councilmember Thorson?
What's the current rehab schedule for that Tower Park water tower, do you know?
I think the next 4 or 5 years.
4 to 5 years is when we're looking at having to do what you're talking about, sandblast the existing paint and do some other internal work.
It may be it may be 3 or 4 years. I'd have to double check, but
It's coming up. It's coming up. Yeah.
So that would probably be the time frame that we'd be looking at to get this involved.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I like the idea of being able to construct it on site where we're not having to take could happen, assuming in that case, Murphy's Law, we go through a drought and then everyone would be using excess water and then we'd have some real issues, but the idea that we can construct it in an existing site. I imagine too that this would be much taller than the existing water tower.
So it wouldn't be any taller. It would be large, it would be wider, because the way you can control the water pressure in a system is by elevating your water tower, right? Well, if we build a tower whose tank is higher than the existing tower, all of a sudden we're raising the pressures in the system, and we don't want to do that, right? So the top of the tank is going to sit at the exact same level of the existing tank. It's just going to be wider to be able to hold more water in it. Does that make sense?
This really reminds me of my physics classes, or
Yeah.
whatever classes that
Pretty
was.
simple
chemistry
terms,
or
but-
whatever.
Water comes squirting out of the hose when
Yeah.
you raise it up out
Exactly.
of the.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Councilmember Thorson.
Just the reason I mention that is because, in seeing some of these composite towers, I guess just from driving by, they appear to be taller. Maybe some of them are, but that one in Tower Park, I think it's just designed differently and it has different aesthetics to the park that's there in the neighborhood, so I'm sure we're gonna have to do some notification of the neighborhood and let them know what the plan is and where it's gonna be located, what it's gonna look like, and get input.
Yeah, when we get to, like, you know, if we do kind of put this into a year placeholder for a specific year, I think, you know, we'd need to go back 2 years prior to that, and we'd want to start engaging with the people that live around there. We have the ability to kind of create a 3D mock-up so people can see what the new one would look like sitting where it would sit when the old one is gone. So we can, you know, manage some people's expectations who live around there, what it would look like. We can have, I've done this in other cities before, we're gonna have some good discussions about color, logo, which way do the logos face, right? I mean, people like to get into that and have some ownership with those kind of conversations. So we'd probably want to start on some of that, and that would also inform some of the design effort, I guess, in terms of putting together the bid documents for what would actually ultimately build it, you know, 2 years after we would start. I think that's probably about the right timeframe.
Yeah, and what Morgan was saying about doing the 3D models and stuff, we can put different types of logos in. And actually our visualization department, and this is just a project that I just did, of a different water tower, they were able to do like a 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. kind of fast track as the sun is changing, how you can see the water tower and stuff like that. So we can do many things to try to communicate with the public, whatever it is we're trying to do. So, but I agree with the 2-year timeline. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it'll be a part of staff's future revisions or discussions on future CIPs that you'll look at in terms of what's the right year and how does that fit with the existing maintenance program. And I think what we've talked about here is all really good stuff. I think we agree with what you guys are saying, and
If we were to get grants, if they
yeah,
become
we
available,
would
we'd go
want
after those. I
to,
mean,
if we
go
can get
sooner
parts
than
of it
later,
built for
then-
free, absolutely.
I got one question for you.
Yeah.
I'm still confused in regards to if we're at groundwater, and we go to surface water. So surface water, to me, you're getting it out of probably a different municipality, or, because we're not creating our own surface water. This would come from probably our neighboring cities. And if we were to go to surface water, or had to go to surface water, you would not use your water towers anymore.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so you're correct. So not on the water tower part, so let me expand a little bit more. So if you go into surface water, typically it's because you have a river that's running right next to you. So Minneapolis, St. Paul have the Mississippi, right? You guys don't, right? So the option would be to, like Morgan said, purchase water on a wholesale basis, which a lot of communities in the Twin Cities do off of, you know, possibly St. Paul regional water, right? So that's kind of a hypothetical scenario. What typically in these contracts, the way they're set up is that, yes, we'll provide you the water and this is how much we're going to charge you for the water, but you need to take care of your infrastructure. So you guys would still have your water rates like you do today, because you still need to cover water main breaks and water main replacements and water tower rehabs and stuff. In addition to that,
So we are still using the water towers.
correct,
So we're storing the water in the water towers, not from the ground, but from the surface.
from the surface,
Got it.
correct, yeah. And the reason for that is because as hypothetically, say, St. Paul Regional Water sells you water, they're gonna wanna make sure that you're not taking any of their storage capacity. They wanna make sure that you have enough storage capacity of your own, right? Because they have their own water towers to serve their own portion of the system, right? So that's why, even if you transition, there would still be a need for that slightly larger water tower, right? If that makes sense.
And that makes sense now, because I know St. Paul they've gotten rid of a lot of the water towers, but they are the source. Like Highland Park, haven't they gotten rid of water towers, or they still use those?
I don't think so.
I thought they decommissioned,
I think if
or
they're,
maybe it's the old water tower they decommissioned.
I think if they're decommissioning, the storage is something that is dictated by
still have
population
water
and demand, right? So they might get rid of one, but they might rebuild another one and make it bigger than it was before to try to keep that storage number the same, which is similar to what we're talking about here. We're replacing a smaller tower with one bigger tower rather than just building a
Got it.
third one somewhere
Makes sense.
else, which saves on property acquisition and I guess property impact too. We're proposing a tower pretty much where there has been one all along.
One other
Councilman
question,
Person.
comment. Wasn't some of the CARES Act money, this was an allowable use for that, is to invest in your water infrastructure and things like that?
Yeah, that's my understanding, correct.
And then just, my personal belief on this White Bear Lake lawsuit, I mean, I think the likelihood of us having to switch to surface water in order to do that is low. But even if we did, there'd be another lawsuit to counter that would take, probably just as long, if not longer, than this lawsuit is taking, which is getting close to a decade. So, I mean, obviously, we wanna be mindful of that, but I don't envision us having to switch over to surface water anytime soon.
Oh, no.
And that also doesn't negate the fact that we still need to have storage capacity, so we still are gonna have to deal with this one way or the other.
Okay. Anything else on water towers? Did you need any other
Nothing further,
information
Your
from
Honor.
us, or
I'm sorry?
did you need anything else from us?
No, like I said, I think staff then will have some conversations over the next year to figure out where this might fit in a future CIP update for you to consider.
Yep. Okay. Is there any other questions, water towers? If not,
Just comment that perhaps the Arts and Culture Commission, in addition to planning, would like to see a little design. Yeah, I think they'd be interested in that.
Maybe that's a future agenda item for that commission, knowing that that's an opportunity. It doesn't have to be a logo or the name of the city, right? It could be anything.
Yeah, could be anything.
Like a snowman? Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I got one more.
City Manager Frandl.
Thank you, Mayor. Next topic is the tax forfeiture parcel located up at Five Corners on 7th Avenue and 3rd. Morgan will be speaking to that.
Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So this was an item that just came up really quickly right before the packet was due. Ramsey County staff had contacted me. There's a depiction in your packet of a small, not buildable per our zoning code. I did check with the planners. Piece of property on the south side of the intersection of 7th Avenue and South Avenue and the 3rd Street cul-de-sac south of South Avenue. It's tax forfeit. The county notified itself because the county owns the property next door, so the next door property owners were notified that this is a tax forfeit parcel. There's gonna be an opportunity to bid on it on December 8th, which is, I think, tomorrow. The minimum bid, I believe, is $1,000. And the county said, we know that there's the potential for some intersection improvements, a potential roundabout is in your comprehensive planning documents. Are you interested? We think you might be interested. We think it might be a good thing to move forward with. And there might be the need for some future agreements to figure out who owns what, and they were willing to figure that out later between the city and the county. They just wanted to know if we were interested, so I said, yes, I think we're interested. I'll discuss it with the planning commission, which I did last week Thursday, discuss it with the city council here today. If the city council is in general agreement that we should see if we can get it, if it's available, I'll communicate with Ramsey County, and if the title can be acquired, then that's great. If it's not acquired, then at least we tried. So I think the opportunity in front of us is to work with Ramsey County to acquire that property through the tax forfeiture process. I don't have any, I said in the memo that they're looking into the procedures, and I haven't gotten any good information from them about what exactly happens, so what I know is what is in the memo right now. As I said, the minimum bid is $1,000. Tax assessed value on the property is $2,000. Even if it was slightly more than that, it would still be a very reasonable acquisition cost for some additional land that, even if a piece of the roundabout, for example, or road doesn't lie right on that property, it also provides some flexibility to potentially move some utilities into that area. We have Excel Gas has put those above ground regulating valve things that there have been some concerns or complaints about the noise that they make. Maybe as a separate item or in conjunction with roundabout construction, some of those things can be relocated or screened or housed if there's more room or more flexibility to be able to do things and get them out of the way of the street and street improvements. There's just a lot of opportunity for things that could happen if you have a little bit more, a little bit more than 1/10 of an acre of property to work with in that area. So that's why it seems a worthy thing to try to pursue.
So this came to us before, a couple of years ago, I believe.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep, and at that time, the roundabout, I don't think we were talking about that as much, and like you say, a lot of the utilities up there, especially that big gas main, if we do need to move it, or like you say, some utilities, maybe we do need a little bit of property. To me, it kind of makes sense, because I think making that roundabout possibility, we might need it. And if we don't need it at that time, maybe we could, at that time, we'd go back or go back to or we just hang on to it.
Yeah.
It's, that piece of property it's a kind of a dead piece right there. So that's kind of my thinking, is that if we are going to do the roundabout, that potentially that could be a possibility of use for that. Any other council members? Councilmember Thorson?
So I guess anytime we're gonna acquire property, it's supposed to get reviewed by the planning commission. Sounds like that's been done. And what was their input?
They were in support of it.
Okay. And, a question I always ask is, well, what's the public purpose? What does this serve? And it sounds like it's for utility easement or utility right away, or,
I would say utility and transportation right
Okay.
away, yep.
and, so what you're looking from us is a yes or no, and then what a maximum bid price would be that we're willing to go forward and.
I think so, because I didn't really get any clarity from the county. Yeah, that would be tough for you guys. I mean, you don't have any appraisals or anything. To me, I think that you know, even $5,000 would seem to be extremely reasonable. Just my own personal experience with acquiring easements, not even just fee title property, but easements for improvement projects. So I would say if you're not comfortable giving me a number, that's okay. If you would rather do that, I think that's perfectly acceptable, and I'll take that direction, certainly. So, but I can't all I can tell you is that, again, the minimum bid is 1,000. The tax assessor value, according to Ramsey County, is 2,000 approximately. And possibly some number, you know, greater than that would still be of a value too. Now, we
This is
haven't,
not
we
a-
haven't talked about a source of funds for this, so that's another kind of quagmire. What Ramsey County has said is that they are perfectly fine working out the details with the city later as a separate process. We don't need to, you know, pay them now or supply that bid. That's my understanding. They're willing to try to handle this on their own because they do own the adjacent property. They also own right-of-way immediately adjacent, meaning South Avenue is a county road. So I don't think you need to give me direction on a max price.
What's the adjacent property? Is that 17?
It's Lot 1, which is a triangle, which actually the 3rd Street cul-de-sac sits on top of right now. So they own the property that our City Street cul-de-sac is on top of, which is an interesting situation. I'm not too sure how that occurred.
I'm looking at numbers here. I look at 17, and then there's a 60. I don't know if that's the same, what you're looking at?
Are you looking at the map in the packet on the second page 2 of the staff memo?
Yes.
So the red numbers are the lot numbers. So looking at the 3rd Street cul-de-sac.
Oh, one,
So
okay.
lot
one.
number 1 is currently owned by Ramsey County. Lot number 2, which is highlighted in red, is what we're currently talking about. And then lots 3, 4, 5, that's privately held property to the west, to the southwest.
And does Lot 1 covers that whole street?
Well, about a third of the cul-de-sac circle.
Am I seeing it?
It's a small triangle.
Just that little piece there.
Yep.
Sides. It runs from this corner to this corner.
So could I ask a clarification
Cul-de-sacs.
question?
Mm-hmm.
So this property that's highlighted in red currently is not owned by the county?
Correct. It's owned by
It
the,
says on this, it says owner name, State of Minnesota Trust exempt Ramsey County tax forfeiture land.
correct.
So that just means it's privately owned right now and it's going into tax forfeiture.
Correct.
And the
I
county.
think it's no longer privately owned. I think it's in tax forfeiture. And the options are to provide the first right of refusal of purchase to the adjacent property owner.
Okay, so that's why Ramsey County is reaching out to us. They're saying, hey, if we buy this, would you be interested in potentially acquiring it? Okay.
It probably
So-
sits in a portfolio.
So we don't need to give you, yes, and, $2,000 is the max bid. That's not.
I think they would have told me that's what we need.
Because my concern would be that if the neighbor's interested and all of a sudden he's getting in a bidding war with the city, why would we, other than, the points you've made, because then we're taking on the responsibility to maintain the property and if it doesn't ever, if nothing comes of this to move the existing pipes from Excel or to incorporate the roundabout, now we've got another piece of land that's not really buildable that we're responsible to maintain when potentially the neighbor might want it. So I guess, I'm personally okay with, giving Ramsey County the nod that we might be interested, but I guess we'll see how the bid goes, because maybe if they don't even get it, then it's kind of moot point.
Is this a buildable lot?
No. It is not buildable
Okay.
by zoning code.
Everybody all comfortable with that?
Yeah, I am. I used to work down there, so I kind of know how it works. And it's an auction and, whatever. But, yeah, I'd be willing to, we're interested in it, obviously. I don't want to get in a bidding war.
So we'll give you the green light, go ahead.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'll provide a future update to you
Okay.
after the results of the bids are in.
City Manager Randall.
Thank you, Mayor. Next up for topic is 2022 Municipal Fee Schedule and Utility Rate Schedule. I think before we jump into that, I'd like to just acknowledge Dan a little bit here. He came here new to the city, been here a few months. He's been dealing with several different software programs that we have. We jumped right into the budgets. He's done a great job. I've never seen him without a smile on his face. He's just really done well, and I just would like to acknowledge that, and I really appreciate it.
We know how difficult a position it was jumping in too, because it's, like you say, you jump into a budget cycle, thank you. You are doing a great job.
With that, I will turn it over to our finance director to discuss the fees.
Thank you very much, Edwards, interim city manager, Brian. And thank you, mayor and council members. It is the city council's responsibility to establish fees and rates for permits, licenses, and services that are provided by the city of North St. Paul. Annually, the city staff reviews those rates, makes some recommendations and suggestions of making adjustments to those rates and fees. This is the proposed fee schedule and utility rate schedule. And there are some increases that are there. My understanding is that there has been no increases for the past 4 years. There's three things that this municipal schedule and utility rate schedule accomplishes. First of all, I want to give a lot of kudos to many staff members in the city for collaborating on trying to get this done and making suggestions and looking at costs that are associated with the different fees that are established in this document. And I actually, on the community development side, Cynthia did a tremendous job, Jill, Lisa. We had the police department that actually had some rates that were never even incorporated within this document in the past. And so Phil, our chief of police, brought those to our attention, so we incorporated those. Carrie's been absolutely instrumental on this document. And so, and then we've had, in the finance, Barb and Jackie helping out with determining some of the rates and the impacts that those rates would end up having to the residents. And so there's three accomplishments that the rates do, and it's trying to make consistent rates. There were some rates that were, on the permitting sides where there were 60, 65. They tried to make them consistent as much as possible. Including, and then include all the charges. I gave the reference to what the police department had brought to our attention, that there were some rates and fees that they were charging that were never incorporated into this document. And then the second, there's a kind of a universal increase in technology fee from $10, currently at $10 to $15. When we stop and we kind of think about that, the technology fee doesn't generate a great deal of money. It's in the budget in 2022 at $14,500. If you were to raise that by that $5, it would generate an approximately, $7,000 additional income. But what it really does is it starts to look at and emphasize that the technology fee that's being charged is really kind of more on a principle standpoint, that technology is really the way that we communicate with the residents of the city, that we really should be investing in technology is a way to minimize the increases in staff and efficiencies that we can attain. I do have a quick little story that on December 1st, I think everybody's aware that the parks become available to be rented for the upcoming year. Before the software program that is in existence today, it would have required additional staff to come in, be there
8 o'clock in the morning, ready to go, and we'd end up having a line of people. With this software, comes at midnight on December 1st, people are able to start booking online. And I think this was probably one of the records that there was over $16,000 that was generated in that first day by you know, booking of the fees. Part of that is due to, you know, the change again of putting a deposit down on some of the park rentals. But it virtually did not require any input from any staff. There were a couple of, you know, we had one resident who booked it twice. So we'll end up having to produce a refund for that individual for that second reservation. But the point is that technology can make the city more efficient and not require as much staff time being involved. And so I really think that the technology fee proposal to be increased from 10 to 15, again, won't have a significant impact on those who are utilizing those services, but it really does say to the city that, hey, we do need to put more money into our technology, and this is just a small piece in which we can try to generate some more revenue to do that. And then the third impact that we're seeing here is that of the enterprise funds, all of the rates are staying the same except for the electric rate. And Brian wears two hats now. He's as the interim city manager and also is still involved overseeing the electric department. And he got information from the utility that there was going to be a 2.5% increase in the consumption component of electricity. I think everybody's aware. I think NSP has got like a 14% proposal increase. They'll probably end up getting as they go through the PUC, they'll probably end up getting probably an interim rate increase of somewhere around that 8 to 9% component. So utilities are going up. You know, we see that on a continuous basis. So on the consumption part in the rates, we've got the rates increased 2.5%. What does that mean as an impact to an average residential home? That means about a $20 per year increase on that 2.5% increase. Again, thanks to fantastic staff to be able to run those estimates out. Barb in the finance and the utility provided that estimate for that. So we can definitely, I can share the screen and we can kind of go through the document itself. It's got redlined the changes that are being proposed. And let me see. I think in the opening pages, all you're going to see is number changes to make sure that they're matched up, and I think I've got them all correct now. So again, on the and we can definitely catch on that one. On animal fees, there was a change in the technology fee from that $10 to the $15. Building permits, pretty much everything on this page number 2 stayed the same, with the exception again of the technology fee changing from $10 to $15, and also an additional note that says no refunds issued for permits under $45 before the technology fee is applied. And some of these are consistent with some of the practices that are being done today in the community development section. So that's why it was really good to have this collaborative effort and everybody viewing and looking at all of the rates to make sure that we're being consistent with how we're serving the residents of the city. Again, the technology fees is the only change on page 4 of the document, page 66 of the printout. And then in permit fees, to be consistent, sheds, driveway fences, retaining walls are all being changed to be $65. 3 of those were at 60 prior to that. The addition of the words new for toilets and then new for sinks for clarification, on the plumbing permit section. Mechanical permit, there's a new item that's being added called a magic pack. My understanding, that's kind of like a combination of air conditioner and furnace. Don't know mechanically enough about that, but that was brought, that should be the same as the furnace.
So if they're being installed at the same time?
Yeah, kind of combined.
Rather than one for each one?
Yeah. And then it's bringing those rates being consistent to $65. And then if there's something that's being missed that's not clarified underneath the mechanical permit, then it would be other. And again, it would be that $65. As we move to the other, next page where it has commercial fees, there's plumbing minimum, mechanical minimum, and really the valuation-based fees that are below are really how the costs are actually determined. With that, and there's already a minimum that's there as $80.55, so the $95 being removed and referring back to the valuation-based fee calculation that's on the bottom of page 6 of the document. Again, on the next page, the demolition permit fees, and it's based on valuation, removal of the minimum fee of $100. And then there's an add cell tower permit, city permit fee, $12.50 plus the tech fee. Again, just after page 8, going on to 9, the technology fees changing. You're going to see that consistent through the document. It's been changed from the 10 to the 15. Business license, the amusement park showcases and circuses, first days, been changed to 500. Each additional day is 100. Again, there's a note on the bottom that technology fee is added to all licenses.
So if I was to have a circus, it'd cost $500?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can you speak to it's like maybe 4 times the cost than it was before?
I actually cannot speak to why the change onto it. It can definitely have staff review that and make a comment back to it. Did we lose my connection here? So again, this fee is done by ordinance, so there still will be a final approval that will be necessary in early January, so I definitely will get an answer at that final approval.
What was the question, Councilmember Wong?
It increases basically fourfold.
About fourfold, so.
So we'll find out why there was that significant change from 125 to 150. Or 500, I'm sorry, yes. And the same with each additional day is the same thing from 25 to 100. So we will have an answer for you on that. And then we have on the massage enterprise, per employee, new is 2,000, renewals 150.
I'm just curious, do we have a lot of peddlers that come in for licenses?
Just a few. During the pandemic, we didn't issue any peddler permits. There was just a couple that got issued this summer.
And then on the next page, contractor license, General contractor from 80 to 70. No fee for licensed plumber from 60 to 70. Again, to make the things consistent. On the electrical charges for installation of electric service was an add of $6 per foot for frost charges. And then on the lighting service governmental units, each one of the 100 watt, 250 watt, 400 watt was changed, increased by 50 cents. The word minimum was added to other electrical charges underneath the commercial and industrial for deposits. And then solar service application was added at $100. Equipment charges all stayed the same. Fire department fees all stay the same. Again, adding that technology fee. And then just removal of the $1 to $500, and then changing the next one from $1 to $2,000. A little bit more clarification. It still means the same. You're going to pay that $28.05 for the first $500. It's already written in there, so it was kind of redundant. There's an ad plan review fee of 65% of the valuation for both residential commercial projects. And then there's fire department lock boxes that have been added to the rate sheet, which have currently been being charged. Again, on the miscellaneous fees, there's an technology fee. In addition, on the Buckthorn Polar Deposit 5-day rental was added $100, and then clarification for deposit/build if not returned in 30 days. And there may be, Brian just brought to my attention on these parks and recreation fees, these were what were approved earlier this year. We need to make a clarification. He brought, because obviously you can see that on Casey Lake, the resident versus non-resident, resident's actually higher than the non-resident. I don't think that that's correct, so we'll end up having to make sure that we get that corrected before it actually gets published. I'm just making a note of that. And then the rest of the rates should be what was approved by the Parks Commission and the City Council earlier this year. They're just being incorporated into this document. Planning and zoning fees all stay the same. Except for the variance request from residential, changing from $200 to $250 on the application fee. And then you can see in the police department fees, this is lining up with what they're already charging residents today, and incorporating some other fees that they have for color digital photos, 911 audio file, 911 transcript, squad video, body worn camera, and their fees are there. And then there's been a change to put in the police officer at, it was at actual, and our police chief has kind of looked at what the average cost with benefits, of officers, and so has inserted in there $90 per hour, which also incorporates the use of the vehicle, and $150 on holidays. And then underneath the public work fees, the public street improvements, since the city is no longer at this point in time doing assessments, we're just removing those fees off of the document.
Quick question on the police department photograph. Is that for, can you do like passport, or is it, if you get arrested and you get a picture, or is it, do people come in and get a picture taken for their? It just says photographs, and it's $40. Unless it's,
I think
Maybe if-
all of these charges are more related to if there's a police incident.
that's,
and,
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're requiring a, there's a color.
An accident or something.
Yes,
You
correct.
can request a picture or whatever. It's not your picture, $40 for the chief, or,
$5 wouldn't be enough for
Yeah.
that. If it's autographed, then it's worth quite a bit more.
looking for the police calendar here.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a question on that public works fees there. I mean, the council voted back in 2019, I think it was, because the 2020 street project to do away with that. And I thought that year we removed all this from the fee schedule. Are you saying that this just continued on? Okay, so now we're officially scrubbing it from the fee schedule, even though action was taken in 2019 to.
Correct. And that's where part of what was being accomplished was to kind of clean it up and make sure that things were more consistent and that we were hopefully getting all of the charges at the city. So we had one consistent document that we could publish. And that was actually, and that's where, again, a lot of staff involvement to make sure that we were being consistent. And that's what the practices were, and especially when we're utilizing software programs now that actually are doing a lot of this stuff for us instead of our manual calculations, that we make sure that this is consistent with what has been put into the software programs themselves.
In regards to the police department fees, under squad, the last item, there's just a small typo. It's really, the release is spelled wrong.
Yes, it is.
Sorry, just a small little thing there.
That will be corrected. And then on the right-of-way permits that were added for residential trenching for the various components on there. And then you see like the as-built fee of $250, that's been being charged to date. It just has not been on the fee schedule itself, so we're just making sure that this document is as comprehensive as possible. And then there's some more additions of radio readers for water service, replace damaged radio receivers, putting in the different size meters and the charges that are associated with those. Again, incorporating charges that are already out there, but just have not been into this and fully adopted by the city council in the same document. And then there's an after public works services fee of $240 if there ends up having to be a, call-in staff after business hours. And then we come to the electric rates, and you'll see that those consumption rates have been increased 2.5%. Garbage rates stay the same. Surface water rates stay the same. Wastewater rates stay the same. Water rates, there was just a typo that had been in the document on the Maplewood Water Service. It was listed as 2108. It really should be 1207. So that's being corrected. And then down below was at 1208, should be 1207. And there was a 7 that was missing on the last digit in that decimal. And that is all of the changes for, that are incorporated into the municipal fee schedule and utility rate schedule. And any questions, thoughts, concerns?
Councilman, or comments?
Well, I mean, I think some of this ties into the discussion we're gonna have in the enterprise fund, so I guess I'll just wait to comment at that point. I would like to state, though, that I'm against the continuation of the streetlight fee. I understand we've had discussion about that in the past, and I understand where our electric department is saying there's a reason for the fee. I just think that it adds complexity to the billing, and that, you know, that fee should just be representative in the rate that we charge. You know, we're kind of late in the game here to have a discussion about that kind of stuff. It's December 7th, and we're looking to approve this, but I, you know, hope that maybe once the new city manager's on board, we can have continued discussion about simplifying the bill and looking at something like that, getting rid of it.
And I would agree that, you know, this new city manager coming in, taking a look at it all this. So,
In terms of the garbage rates, I see that the recycling rates are consistent, and you can all help me, but yeah, they're all consistent regardless of the volume. I would think that we would want to incentivize our residents to recycle more. And perhaps there's more context to it. But just something for us to think about as we look at new rates is how to incentivize our residents to recycle more.
So are you saying look at reducing the rate to help encourage more recycling?
Yeah, and maybe perhaps in, you know, when you reduce your garbage waste, you might recycle more. So kind of how does that work in tandem with the garbage rates? Just something for us to consider. Thank you.
Well, Councilmember Wong, you make a very good point. I mean, part of, I think, the next level that needs to be looked at is when you're looking at any types of rates, what is your overall strategic approach? What are you trying to accomplish? The same type of thing can go from energy consumption, where, you know, your rate structure can, you know, promote people to be more conservative, either that or there's a higher rate that gets established to some degree. But we also have to balance it between looking at what is a reasonable or average consumption, and really it's in certain ways the structure then ends up penalizing those who are above and beyond that norm, and to kind of hopefully force in a way, you know, conservation initiatives within the city itself. So yeah, very, very good point.
Just a little comment on that,
Thorson.
just to provide a little more context. I think, you know, real quick, the part of the decision, I mean, when we switched haulers, the rates significantly fell for everything, but the recycling, on the face of it, looked like it doubled, but we went from recycling being collected every 2 weeks to being collected every week. I think that was part of that thought process of, well, if we can encourage people to recycle more, if it's being picked up every week, and, you know, establishing that rate, we certainly could say, well, it's only $1, or we could even say it's free to recycle, but then, you know, where do you move that cost? You move it to the trash, and then the trash rates are subject to the solid waste tax and the county environmental charge tax. So I think that was part of the reason why we set it at that level, but it was also supposed to be reviewed on an annual basis, because the unknown factor was the tipping fee, and that's just strictly based off of how much trash and tonnage is being produced citywide. So ideally, someday, these trucks will have some sort of capability. I know some of them do, and I think there's some in Denver, at least they tried it for a while. They can weigh the trash as they're picking it up, and then you get billed as a consumption, just like water and electricity. But in the meantime, this isn't a perfect system. We've established these rates, and just constantly reviewing those and our fund balance and things like that, I think will help kind of get us closer to that. But I think, I agree with you that there's certainly ways to incentivize less wasteful trash by having those rates higher versus recycling or reusing products.
So if there's no other questions or comments, there's some revisions that will be made. We'll get an answer for January on the amusement. We'll take care of release, correctly spelled out. Make sure that the park building rates, residential, non-residential, are accurate before it actually gets published out. And then there's, for in the future, looking at streetlight fees and recycling fees and so forth. And I think that there needs to be, with the new city manager, looking at the whole fee structure and so forth. But again, very encouraged by the collaboration from staff around the city and helping put together this document for your review and consideration.
Okay. I think you might want to just jump right into the enterprise funds then.
And in the enterprise funds, you have seen all of the budgets, and were provided already in the past, the line items. The only thing that has changed since your past review, obviously, was increase in expenditures and an increase in revenues on the electrical side due to the 2.5% increase on the consumption side to it. What I would like to pull up is a question that has been raised on a number of occasions, is really the discussion on fund balance. And I was really hoping I can find. I handed out a document. Handed out a document today that takes kind of a higher level look at the fund balances for the enterprise funds. Again, we have Baker and Tilly working on those fund balances. Yeah, that's it. So you'll also see it on the screen. And so going back to the last audited year, which is for the fiscal year that ended December 31st of 2020, the fund balance is really looking at, there's an overall net position, and then there's a net investment in capital assets, and really you need to take that net investment in the capital assets out. Basically, that's where on an annual basis, it'll be, if you were to purchase no other capital assets, that would eventually be depleted. It's actually your depreciation expense. And so over time, what that ends up doing is it's gonna, once the net investment in capital assets is gone, it ends up reverting back to what your net position is. So for right now, I've taken it out in the illustration here to show you what your fund balance is of unrestricted as of December 31st of 2020. And then looking at it purely from a budgetary standpoint, in the budget that was approved by the City Council in 2021, and the budget that's being proposed to be adopted later this evening for the 2022, and then showing what an estimated fund balance, if everything was on budget, both expenditure and revenues, what the fund balance would be as of the end of 2022. And you can see the fund balances are all very healthy, with the exception of fiber optics, and we've known that for a while, that's been in the negative, and it's slowly, probably take another 30 years for it to finally break to the break-even point, but you know, there is a plan that's in place to make that. So when we first look at a fund balance and we say, wow, our fund balances are fantastic, I want to caution everybody, because part of the reason for a fund balance in an enterprise fund is it's an ongoing concern. And what that means is that there's another year of business, there's another year of business, and it keeps on going, and keeps on going. There's other needs that are there. Part of the needs that we've identified, and so what I've done is I have a different category down here that shows some additional changes to the fund balance that'll be coming up in time. One, we've adopted, and it'll be asked to be adopted one more time because there's another change to the CIP from 2022 to 2031. The 2022 amount's already included in the 2022 budget. So from 2023 to 2031, those are your expenditures that are going to come out of those respective funds for vehicle and equipment and utility infrastructure preservation. So right away, you're already starting to draw down that fund balance. There's already a plan that's out there that'll be incorporated into those annual budgets. And then there's two other components that I've got highlighted because those are part of what is going to be part of that Baker-Tilly and that what-if scenario that we're going to play out. And one is, what's the change in debt payments? If we were to bond no other money in our utilities, which we're already planning on doing in this upcoming in 2022, if, those debt payments would drop if we were to issue no more debt and eventually be zero. If we have a plan that we're going to build additional infrastructural needs and we're going to be bonding, then we're going to add debt to that. So that number needs to be filled in there to what that cost is going to be. And then annual depreciation, like I've already said, I've just totally just added that back because over time, when everything's fully depreciated, that'll increase your unrestricted fund balance. And then the other unknown in there is the change in that position from an operating budget. So that's, again, that Baker-Tilly what-if scenario and tool will help us do. And what does that mean? We'll be able to look at, is there a need to adjust rates? We already know that cost of living will change our expenditure side to it. We'll see it in our salaries. We'll see it in our cost of goods sold. We'll see that continuously moving. We can put in escalators in there to make assumptions of whether it's a 2.5%, 3% escalation on those various components, and be able to determine layered in with what our capital expenditure plans are that are identified here to find out, are these fund balances really, really healthy, or are they not? Or does it require us to change our rates? Right now, just without those other two components, again, you can see that we're relatively healthy in our fund balance. Again, we need those other two planning tools. And that's where I always was kind of cautious, saying I didn't want to bring this information, until we had the tool totally set. But it's been asked on a number of occasions, and so there's nothing wrong with showing where we're at. But you can see the funds, you can see the water will dip down on a negative over the next 10 years based upon the information that's provided here. Obviously, that would be escalated to some degree when we start escalating our expenditures, because expenditures always go up. Again, whether it's personnel costs, whether it's the cost of goods that we're purchasing. So somewhere down there may be a look at how do we change our water rates. Electric is sitting pretty good at approximately 3.6 million. We've got surface water that's sitting very healthy at 3.8. We've got wastewater at 1.9. Again, we'll skip over fiber optics, but obviously the fund balance is going to get much better, in time. And then you can see solid waste that has virtually no capital expenditures, no other infrastructural things. So the fund balance didn't change, which is sitting at about $678,000 to date. That's where that recommendation to utilize that $650,000 of those funds was made earlier in the year, but then we've kind of pulled that back regarding the community center. So that's kind of where that component came from. As you can see, right now today, and at least for the near future, we're sitting actually very good in our enterprise funds. Again, that study, in that tool, that Baker Tilly, we will, as a group and with the city manager, we will get into looking more in depth at our rates, at our expenditures, and as we develop our plans to the future. We've heard earlier tonight about the potential of another tower. There's could be some possibility of some additional funding sources. I believe we do have the tower in our capital plan. If it's not, might be a different one. I think it was out there for,
Yeah, I think that was a placeholder. I don't think it's been updated for the more recently estimated numbers that are in the study, but I think you're right. Yeah.
at least we had a placeholder, at least for the capital costs component, using 3.7 million for 2022 as a placeholder. So that's part of what's driving that water to be showing as a negative at this point in time, because that's a huge expenditure. Now, we can look at how we want to do it. That would be if we were to actually expend it all out of the fund. Obviously, we could defer that and push it out a little bit longer if we were to bond for the water tower, and/or if we were to get some grants, or if the loan was at a better interest rate than we can do for bonding, which again, we'll find out as time moves on. So all in all, our enterprises are actually doing very good right now. And next year, we will do a greater in-depth look. And now I'll open it up for any questions, comments.
So Dan, when they look at yearly bonding in regards, is this one of the areas that they look at in regards to our rating?
Absolutely. It contributes in two different ways. One, we don't want to have funds with negative balances. So they always ask us a question about the fiber optics, and we always have to kind of give them an explanation of, even though it's out there quite a ways, but we have to give them kind of an explanation of what we have a plan in place, and it'll eventually be positive by such and such a date. The other component that it heavily contributes is because obviously there's cash on hand. And so the city has a pretty good cash availability, that's on hand, which actually looks very good for the city when we go for our bonding. Again, remember the bond rating that we got, we were at a AA, is, hard to move that up. There's only two components that are, one component that's really underneath our control, and that's because of the size of the city, that if we were not to bond as much in debt. However, we've got to balance that between the infrastructural needs that are in the city, so we're kind of stuck into that. And then the other part of it is just because of the median income of the city and the residents that are here, that plays against us in our rating.
Any other questions for Dan? Councilmember Thorson?
Yeah, I know we're, got about 2 minutes here, I suppose, so I'm grateful that we at least got to begin to have this discussion. I wish we'd have more time. A couple of quick points I'd just like to make here on the reasoning why I'm bringing up this fund balance discussion, why I think that's important. I think that kind of guides us on decisions that we make into the future, right? And I'm looking at it from a margin perspective, ideally, I would hope to see our enterprise funds, or at least our electric utility fund, kind of run like a co-op where, we've got all the expenses, we know costs, we've got a set margin that we want to make, and then we determine our rates based off of how we performed on that. That would ultimately lead to consistency. Now, some people may not agree with this assessment, but I think it's certainly fair to say that our electric enterprise fund has been used as just a money jar to pay for things like the fiber optic fund and the community center, and things that retroactively looking back, we can say, well, that probably wasn't the best decision to make now financially. And and it provides very little to no public benefit now versus when it was envisioned back in the day. But rough estimate, our electric fund balance would probably be, fair to say, at least double what it is now if we didn't go down into those endeavors, financing the public or the former community center, and not only the initial construction but the continued operation. And then this fiber optic fund that, they're launching satellites into space to provide high-speed internet now, So, that's where I think, like tonight, we were told initially that fees were gonna stay flat. When I looked at this and saw there was a 2.5% increase in the electric rates, I kind of assumed, well, rates are going up, there's inflation, it's probably tied to our wholesale prices are going up. Is that a fair assessment to say we're trying to match the wholesale price? Okay. So that's used as a reason to raise the rates. But if we've overbilled our customers for decades, like we have in the solid waste fund, I think it's a fair assessment to say there's no need to have $685,000 in a fund that's essentially a pass-through. We don't have any expenses laid out there because other than some staff time to do with billing and customer service, which again is our decision to do, this is a pass-through operation 100%, but because of all these years of adding other fees on that we have the ability to do to finance things that are not related to residential trash, we've built up a balance that, what do we do with it? A couple months ago, we were proposing transferring 600,000 of it to help pay for some repairs in the community center. So it just, I think, it would be nice to spend a little more time, and hopefully when we have the new city manager on board, maybe this is a workshop that we can have early on ahead of the next year's budget, where we can kind of try as a council to see, well, do we want to just keep doing the way things we've done in the past? Or do we want to try to have a path or clear direction of why is it we're doing these things? And we can always we can compare Xcel Energy. I know a lot of people naturally do, but it's hard to compare Xcel Energy to our utility, right? I don't necessarily think that's a good thing to just do. Well, Xcel's raising rates, so we should too. If we're gonna raise rates, we should be doing it for a specific reason. And like you point out, our fund balances tie into our bond ratings, and it's important to make sure that they're healthy. Now, it's great that they seem to be healthy, but I don't know if we have that true assessment yet, and that's something that needs to be looked at on a regular basis as well. But to help us as a city into the future make these decisions, I think establishing a fund balance goal, it doesn't have to be an exact dollar amount, but, we have it in the general fund. Is it 35%? Yeah, and for many years we were under that. Now we're at that. That certainly helps. And we got, 1 minute here, so, I think the theme here is it's a work in progress. I appreciate the work you've done and staff has done to put this together, and looking forward to future discussion.
And I think that's right. We got to get Baker Tilly's going to do the study. We've talked about that this year. You're a new finance director. We have a new city manager coming in. So I think, 2022 is going to be a lot of workshops and getting to know our new systems that we're implementing also.
No, absolutely, and I look forward to those conversations. I think they're going to be fantastic conversations to have. I kind of want to leave you with one final little thought that's in there. Our budgets, and historically, they've actually come down, at least the last 2 years, they've been out there as such, with the exception, because there's a small transfer from HRA and the EDA, which are all included in the budgets that you're going to be approving later. There's $820,000 that gets transferred. The majority of it, I'll say $790,000 of it, is being transferred from your enterprise funds into your general fund. So we're going to have some very interesting conversations. That's $790,000. Your other avenue in which to get that, and we'll see that when we do the truth and taxation presentation, is to levy it. And that $790,000 is going to end up being approximately a 15% increase in your levy. So those are some considerations that we're going to have to take, and to take that balancing act into why some of those components, and when we're looking at the rates that we establish and so forth. But I absolutely am open to any discussion, and Councilmember Thorson, you bring up some very, very, very good points. And so I'm actually looking forward to next year and having these discussions and having that tool to be able to play those what-if scenarios and get you the right information with the new city manager so we can make some very good decisions moving forward.
Turn over to interim manager Frandl. Any other?
And that's it for
That's
the
all we got?
works.
All right, so motion to adjourn the workshop.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Thorson,
Second.
second by Councilmember Wong. Any discussion? Not. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned, and we'll take about a 5-minute break.